The following program is presented by the Far East Broadcasting Company because stories of people living out the gospel with their lives inspire all of us. FEBC, taking Christ to the world through radio and new media. Learn more at febc.org.
I always have this feeling that this is not us doing something. This is not us doing something right. This is us just being used by Almighty God. And He's doing all of this when Jesus enters their lives.
His name is Viktor Akhterov, and God is giving him a front row seat to what is happening spiritually in the lives of people all over Russia, Ukraine, and many other countries. Welcome to First Person. I'm Wayne Shepherd, and I welcome Viktor back to our program for an update on the ministry of the Far East Broadcasting Company in Eurasia. What seemed on the surface to be a setback for the ministry has actually resulted in reaching even more people with the gospel, and Viktor will explain in a moment. Telling these stories each week on First Person is our joy, and I appreciate your time as you listen either on radio or through our podcast. We're online at firstpersoninterview.com. Viktor Akhterov is the Russian ministry's director for FEBC, actually responsible for several countries. But when the Russian government took away some broadcast licenses, FEBC went online. Now, together, radio where possible and internet programs are seeing unprecedented increases in listenership and in ministry. And it all began, as Viktor says, just after World War II.
Yeah, we started broadcasting to Russia in 1947, I believe, from the Philippines. And, of course, in those first years, not many people responded. And we thought that hardly anybody is listening. And of course, I wasn't there at that time, 1947. But I was serving under an old missionary who started in 1940s, and he said it was so discouraging, and we had to have so much faith that people are listening. And then when thousands and thousands of responses started to come when Soviet Union disintegrated, and people wrote amazing stories. I still have some of those stories with me in those envelopes, how people listened for years to FEBC shortwave broadcasts and became Christians. And some of them went to prisons. Some of them went to psychiatric hospitals. One man, his name is Boris. I still have his picture, bearded man. And he said, I spent several years in psychiatric hospital because of my faith. And I never felt sorry that I listened to the radio and became a Christian and went through all these trials, and never felt sorry that I followed Jesus Christ.
Wow. Now, new developments, of course, have come into play in Russia as far as FEBC is concerned, but are the broadcasts still being beamed in via shortwave?
No, we are using all the new technologies that are available to us.
Okay.
And even the medium waves, we used to broadcast in Russia in two biggest cities of Russia, in Moscow and St. Petersburg, AM broadcasting. And it was kind of fading out, and we were planning and sitting together and making the strategy to get out of this and go on the internet in maybe 5 years. And then the Russian government just abruptly discontinued our license to broadcast. And we have to now use all these new technologies. And this is so exciting to see what God is doing. He kind of pushes us ahead, and we have no choice but to innovate and to use everything that's out there. And we see amazing response from the Russian people.
Yeah, I want to talk about that response in a moment, but tell me about the programming. What part of the country of Russia itself is reached by FEBC?
Well, of course, we are everywhere. I mean, when we say internet, we say, so many different online networks that we are using. We start from Facebook to Russian kind of Facebook to several different social networks. It is now, we did some studies and saw where people are on the internet in Russia. And most of them are in social networks. They don't go to websites anymore. They're just there to talk with their friends, belong to some group, and some interest groups. And we decided to go there as close to the listener as possible. So the person opens their Facebook account and they see us. We are there. They don't need to go anywhere else. That's why we have so many responses. It is easy to respond. They just type a response and ask a question and share a story. And so it is very, very close to the listener. And that has been a FEBC motto for years, since the very beginning, as close to the listener as possible, as clear presentation of the gospel as possible, as culturally appropriate as possible. And this is what is going on in Russia now.
Well, you are really leading the way in many ways, Victor, and it's so exciting. Now, before I ask you about the response you're getting, let's talk about the types of things you're doing on social media. What is it? Bible teaching? What is it?
Well, we have Bible teaching programs, and what we are trying to do. For example, we broadcast Dr. Magi's program, the Russian version of it, and we adapt the Russian version to the Russian listeners. We do an introduction, we do post-program discussion, and so many people respond because they feel that they are the target of this. We have some good preaching on the programs, and at the same time, we have one gentleman who invites people who never read the Bible, students from local universities. They come and they read the Bible together with this host. And they are reading the Bible for the first time in their lives. And they discover so many new things, and we discover so many new things about the Bible. And they ask very difficult questions sometimes. When you read about the life of Abraham and the way he treated his wife, for example, and they say, what, this is the father of faith? And we start the conversation there. We're, again, very close to the listeners. We invite them into our studios. And we study the Bible, and people are fascinated by it. Sometimes those students come out crying. I saw one lady. I was coming into the studio, and she was coming out, and she's crying. She doesn't know. She was kind of embarrassed. She looked at me and walked right through. The impact of the Word of God is so amazing. And of course, the same thing goes for the listeners who are, most of the Russian listeners and Russian people never read the Bible, and they are listening to those discussions, and they are amazed, and they're responding in wonderful ways.
Victor, do you have any estimation of how many listeners in Russia are being impacted by FEBC?
Well, we know that, of course, when you do the ministry online, you see exactly how many listeners you have, so you don't have to estimate anymore. Last month, we had 2.2 million listeners. Those
goodness.
Are real people who listen to us, and we are excited about that, and to say the least, And it is... Wayne, it is amazing. When a couple of years ago, year and a half, our stations were shut down, we were worried. We did not know what would happen, how fast will we be able to rebuild the audience. And today, as we see people responding and people listening, and when you do a broadcast and you realize that more than 1 million people listen to you right now, it does something to you. You feel this sense of responsibility, and you feel this sense of excitement as you share the good news. And you mentioned, what kind of programs we do. We do, of course, not only Bible study. We do one of the most successful programs that we do is the program for families, how to build a family, how to behave in the family. What are the roles of husband and wife. Nobody in Russia talks about that, and we get so many stories from listeners when they say, why is nobody else talking about that? Just you Christians. And we don't mind. We talk about those issues because the Bible talks about those issues. And I was talking this morning to our program director from St. Petersburg, and I said, I'll be doing this interview with Wayne. Give me a testimony that came in today. And he said one young lady who is about to get married, she emailed us and said, I'm building my family on biblical foundation, even though I never read the Bible, but I listen to your family program every day. And we get a lot of responses like that.
Victor, I want to amplify what you said a few moments ago. 2.2 million people are using the material, the programming online from FEBC. That is astounding that you're having that kind of reach, and it's reaching into all corners of Russia, huh?
It does, and we get response from northern parts of Russia, from Siberia, from the western parts of Russia. A lot of response comes from big cities that we were never really been able to reach, like Novosibirsk, like Krasnoyarsk, those big million-plus population cities in Siberia, and people are just hungry for something healthy. And I'm just quoting people, they're saying very often they don't use Christian phrases that we describe our programs by, but they say something healthy, something living, something real. And this is what attracts people, because we talk about real issues, and we bring the good news, and people hear that too, and they say, you are talking about real life, but you're positive. You're giving us something that uplifts us, and so many people become Christians as they continue to listen.
Victor, as you know, I've met some of the staff in Russia who are accomplishing all this, but how many people work on this?
It's a difficult question for me always. I never know how many people do we have. We have just maybe 5 full-time people who are not only broadcasters but doing all the organizational work. And most of the people who come and do the programs for us are volunteers.
Okay.
Russians cannot support us financially that much, but people really want to minister to their countrymen. And that's why people who come, they volunteer their time. Like this pastor in Moscow has a great, successful church, but he comes 2 times a week to do a family program. He's a psychologist by training, which helps him, when you say you're a psychologist on the radio, people start listening to you. But he presents the biblical foundation for the family, and he does it 2 times a week as a volunteer. And it's people like that who are making this all possible.
We'll continue talking with Victor Akhterov about Russia and Ukraine coming up on First Person.
I'm so grateful for the grace I received while listening to FEBC all day long. I cried listening to God's message multiple times.
The Far East Broadcasting Company receives millions of responses each year from grateful listeners. FEBC is dedicated to taking Christ to the world through radio and new media. To learn more, please visit febc.org. That's febc.org. The Far East Broadcasting Company, until all have heard. My guest is Victor Akhterov. Victor is the Far East Broadcasting Company Director of Russia and Ukraine activity. And we've been talking about Russia thus far, Victor. I want to talk about Ukraine as well. But let me stay on Russia for just a moment. You mentioned the millions of people who are reached and respond, and the relatively few staff that you have, and that Russians are not able to financially support this. How is it underwritten then?
Well, we get a lot of support from the Christians in the States and in Canada. People who feel that this is important to make sure that we are reaching Russia, especially today. As you know, Wayne, the country is kind of going backwards from the freedoms that we had in the past few years, and just in the past year, evangelical churches had about 20,000 inspections from the government. They have this new anti-missionary law. And in the beginning that, the government was trying to calm us down as evangelicals, saying this is against Muslim extremists. And a year later, we have 20,000 inspections of evangelical churches and missions. And as far as I know, 0 inspections of Muslim extremists. So we are dealing with this very difficult, very tough situation, very difficult politically. The elections, presidential elections, are coming in Russia in 2018, and everybody is worried. Everybody is trying on the edge, politically, and that affects us. That affects the church, and that's why God chosen this time so we can use internet, which is still free in Russia, so we can reach so many people for Christ in these difficult circumstances.
Yes, you know of our prayers and support for what you're doing, and we'll specifically pray that the internet remain open for FEBC's outreach there in Russia. Victor, let's also talk about Ukraine. This is a country, again, that I have visited and have close ties with in many ways, and I just feel a great love for the people of Ukraine. And it's pretty exciting to hear that the Far East Broadcasting Company now has been establishing Christian radio stations in Ukraine, actual broadcast stations.
Yes, and we got open doors for us about 4 years ago when we just opened the first station, a FEBC station in Ukraine. And by God's providence, we opened the station right in the city where the war began, where this uprising began. It is just mind-blowing to see, God's plan in action. And we were able, and still are able, to minister to people who are hurting, who are going through very difficult times, who lost their relatives, their friends, their brothers, sisters, to this senseless war. We talk about political changes and chaos and killings and war and all of this. And in this past 3 years, we opened 4 more stations. 4 more stations where we are broadcasting the gospel. One of them is in Odessa, the 3rd largest city in Ukraine. And we will open 2 more. We just received the license last month to open 2 more stations. And we are just still coping with this. God is opening doors almost faster than we can go through them. Another kind of revolution is kind of brewing right now. As I was talking to our board chair, and he's saying that situation in Kyiv is very difficult today. Nobody knows what the future will bring. But we know that God will continue to work and reach people in Ukraine for Jesus Christ.
How do you account for the openness to establish these radio stations? The government must look upon FEBC very favorably.
One of the stations, since we opened our first station, and in this city nearby, a general is in charge of the city because it's this war situation, and the government came to him and said, well, we're going to open a station. You get to choose which kind of station you want. You want music, news, you want army radio, or something else. And he looked at them and said, you know what, I want this different radio station I heard when I was stationed in different city. And my soldiers used to listen to this. And they received hope, wow. They received love. They were so impacted by this station. I wanted the station. And we opened another station in that city. That's how God is working. It's... And people who are in those difficult circumstances, soldiers and people who are displaced, who lost their houses, they want hope. They need hope desperately, and we provide that. So the government is helping us in that, and it is amazing to see how God brings the right people to meet with us. Sometimes you try to go to the government and find some kind of connection to promote your station, your ministry. What is happening in Ukraine is the other way around. They find us, They come to us, and we are just amazed. We just stand there and like, God, whatever you're doing, we are grateful and we are moving forward.
I love that story of that general asking for the kind of station he heard from FEBC. That's incredible. What are the listeners saying? What kind of feedback are you getting to the broadcasts?
Well, amazing, and so many of the stories are they're like very, very similar. When you have millions of listeners and thousands of stories come in, and one man was, and I got this testimony yesterday, was so desperate for hope for real life. And he has a family, 3 kids, and he says, I was so hopeless, so lost. I wanted to kill myself. I was, he said, just decided to go fishing. I wanted to stay there on that lake and just kill myself. And he said, as I was in this little bus, it's like a taxi for maybe 12 people. And he said, the driver was playing your programs, and somebody was saying on the program that your body doesn't really belong to you, it belongs to God. And he said, I was sitting there and I felt God talking to me directly. He said, I came back from this fishing experience and talked to my family and shared, what is going on in my life, that I'm desperate for something new, something real. And he said, my son began talking to me and said, I feel the same way. I was considering suicide. And he said, we suddenly, had this great connection in pain and in hope with my son. And they started praying right that evening. And then he called the radio station, shared this story, and we're leading him to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. And this is just one example of thousands of how people are impacted by radio, how God uses radio to have these real miracles, personal miracles in the lives of people when Jesus enters their lives. And one statistic that I just learned recently, I received this video testimony from a gentleman in Ukraine who is recovering from drug use, and he is sharing his story, how FEBC impacted him and how he's growing in faith because of FEBC. And I talked to our people, and they said, do you know that about 1,000 people died in Ukraine last month because of drug use? We talk about war, we talk about politics, but the real tragedy is there. Young people of Ukraine are dying because of this. And drugs is not just drugs, it's the lack of hope, lack of vision for their lives, lack of opportunity to become the human beings that they want to become, to have a purpose in their life. And we are providing that. And as the ministry in Ukraine is growing, we get more and more testimonies from those people who are desperate, who are on the brink of using drugs and just wasting their lives, just dying in 3 to 5 years. And they come back to life, and they come back to Christ. And it is exciting to see, to read, and to hear those testimonies.
Yeah, the need is great, and we're so excited to hear how God is raising up these radio stations in Ukraine, Victor. We have just a minute left, but Victor, Christmas is not far away. Do you have special plans for programs during the Christmas season?
Yes, Wayne, it is a special time of the year, and my personal passion is to reach Russian and Ukrainian children. And this Christmas we are doing several special projects for them. And I ask for your listeners specific prayers for that, to reach Russian and Ukrainian children for Jesus Christ.
Our guest has been Victor Akhterov of the Far East Broadcasting Company. Our interview was recorded in 2017, but I'm sure that the prayer requests remain the same, and you can go to FEBC.org for an update on the ministry in Russia and Ukraine. It's amazing how the door for FEBC's programs remains open, especially in Russia, and we want to do everything we can to support them in prayer. As you've heard, the Ukrainian government has been extremely cooperative in allowing new radio stations, and let's pray for the staff who are doing all they can to reach Ukrainian people with the gospel. If you'd like to learn more about the Far East Broadcasting Company, please visit FEBC.org. I believe you'll enjoy the listener stories and prayer guide you'll find there. FEBC.org. Merry Christmas. Now, with thanks to my friend and producer Joe Carlson, I'm Wayne Shepherd. Join us next time for First Person.